Mayor Holman.
Here.
Councilmember Niss.
Here.
Councilmember Scharf. Vice Mayor Schmidt.
Here.
Councilmember Wolbach.
Here.
And we have 7 present.
And Councilmember Berman will be joining us about 6 o'clock. So, thank you, Alice.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Our first order of business this evening is to interview 2 candidates for the Human Relations Commission. And our first candidate is Alice Smith. So, you've probably seen this enough that you know the routine. You'll have a minute or so to make any opening comments you want to, and then leave the rest of the time for council member questions.
Fine.
So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for interviewing me. I'm sorry I couldn't see you before, but I was at a wedding in England, which was extremely nice. I'm interested in being on the Human Relations Commission because I love being on the Library Bond Oversight Commission. I think I contributed with my skills and knowledge, and I learned a lot. And I've never wanted to run for city council or for any of the specific offices, but I really do believe that you should participate in your local government to the extent that you have something to contribute. I think I might, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, thank you. So, council members, Liz?
And so, full disclosure, I've known Alice a really long time. So, Alice, I think it would be great if you gave us some more background on your involvement with local government and how you've been involved and sort of what your passions are.
Sure. When you say local government, I've
That's us.
right. I've helped many candidates to run for election, and I've been a fundraiser or an organizer or done precinct work for many of you in this room, and for I've worked on issues at the city level, which include, with the real great assistance of Karen, asking the city council to take a position on the death penalty, for example. I was very active in that coalition, and at that time I was the co-chair. It's on.
It is on, okay.
Thank you.
Just checking, thank you.
I was the co-chair of the ACLU Mid-Peninsula, which position I've just moved off that position, and have been on the ACLU Northern California board as the person who is the representative to the board for many years, 4 years, which is a good turn. In that respect, I looked at the issues of children in school and punishment. I'm very, very interested in having a justice which denies punishment and looks for solutions. I don't feel, for example, that a child should be excluded from school or put in juvenile hall when there might be an alternative, which would be for the schools to educate and find a way to meet up with this child and get them restored, if you will, in a more just society. And I certainly have worked hard on restorative justice with the police, with your police commissioner, with your police chief. I've talked with him and met with him and talked about restorative justice is something which I think the goal of the city should be that, and I know that actually your police department does have that role, and I think they've been sensitive to the needs of children and when they're acting out. So, you know, my fingers are in many pies, and those are just some examples, if you would like. And I should say I have been the president of the Fair Housing Council and was one of the first people to work in Mid-Peninsula Citizens for Fair Housing. I've actually, when I was first an attorney, I had cases which we won or settled immediately when the law was explained, and people who were discriminating against someone on the basis of race back in the late 1970s, and have been working on housing equality, housing access this, that, and the other.
I think we have some other questions. Did I see your hand, Pat? Yeah, Councilmember Burt.
Hi, Alice.
Hi, Pat.
Can you share how familiar you are with the role of the HRC and any different directions or emphasis that you would want to see the HRC pursue if you were on board?
That's a tough question for me because I have been watching the city council meetings on television, but I have not watched the HRC, and I have looked through some of the back tapes. But I think I'm concerned that sometimes issues don't come from the HRC to the city council when they become issues already at the city council. In other words, it's unclear to me that they've taken a strong position. They may well have, and I could be ignorant on this fact, but I'm not aware of their taking a leadership position on the problems of low-income people in the town who have not had an opportunity to have housing and take steps to go forward on various solutions. I know the HRC has done some great things with the problems of homeless. I know that they've been involved in that.
So I'll just, as a comment, unlike most of our other boards and commissions, the HRC actually has some broad latitude to take their own initiatives. So, just for, okay, thanks.
Sure, that's a question. So there was a question in the application that said, if you're appointed, what specific goals would you have? And you kind of asked a bunch of questions back. You didn't really state any goals. So I'm just curious, do you have some goals you'd like to
I don't have a pre-existing agenda, to be frank.
Like you asked the question, should we advocate for Buena Vista residents? Do you have an answer? Or?
Well, yes, I think definitely. I think we should be advocating for, I was late to the policy meeting, policy and whatever it's called. Thank you. Committee where unanimously you all agreed to go for $10 an hour and then, or $10.50, anyway, for an increase in the minimum wage. But I'm not sure that came out of the Human Relations Commission. In fact, I'm pretty sure it didn't. And a living wage in the city of Palo Alto is something which I would have been advocating for, because it seems to me that it's very difficult to live in Palo Alto or to work in Palo Alto. You have to commute out of Palo Alto if you're a low-income person who happens to have a job. You're going to spend all your money on car fare or bus fare or whatever to get home, and there's not enough money. And at $10, there's not enough money. At $15, there's not enough money. So I actually think I would have at least liked to have heard a discussion about the living wage. But I think you guys have done a great step one. But I would be a pressure point, I think, because I think we have to look carefully at who lives in Palo Alto and who has an opportunity to perhaps help others who contribute to Palo Alto, not necessarily living in Palo Alto.
So I have one question.
Sure.
Thank you for applying. So I have one question, which is around our social service organizations. And we have kind of a broad spectrum of those organizations, and I don't know I don't know if you've watched the budget process and how the HRC goes through that budgeting process and budget allocations for those organizations, but is there any that you think, maybe for instance, that the HRC is not recommending over another or should be? So
I can't answer that question because I don't know. I know that in some instances I have been asked by members of the Human Relations Commission in the past, can you give to Catholic social services, for example? When certain values might not be equally shared. And I happen to think that Catholic Social Services is one of the most amazing organizations in the county. I'm deeply involved in AB 109 and the prison program in Santa Clara County. And what the opportunities for the people in Santa Clara County that have been really aided by many of the social services agencies who you have been funding. May have a religious side to it, but they have not crossed over any line that I've ever seen, and I think they've done some wonderful things. I'm sure that Liz knows perhaps more about this, but when you look at what they did for housing, for education, for family services, and those organizations are critical. We can't, I don't see the city of Palo Alto not working in conjunction with many groups, just as I've been on the board of the Red Cross, I guess you know that, yeah, for about 6 years. I'm not there now, but when we were on the board of the Red Cross, we had many agencies who came and provided food, for example, if there was a disaster. And they helped us with it when we had to set up fire shelters. Those things are very, very important.
So you have about, sorry to cut you off, but you have about 20 seconds left to make any kind of closing remark that you want to be fair to the other candidate.
Right, okay, and Valerie's a friend, and she, you know, and I don't know where you are in your continuum, but it's not the most important thing that could ever happen to me, but it is something which I would think I could contribute. And I leave it to your good judgment. I'm sure that you can decide, you know, who you want and what values you have. But what you see is what you get with me, so I don't think you know.
Thank you, and thank you for that. And I should disclose, too, I've known you also for a good number of years, just as Liz has. So thank you for your application.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for what you guys do. I have to say, I admire your fortitude.
So, would you care to? So, thank you, Valerie, for applying and for joining us this evening. And we have 10 minutes for interviews, and if you'd care to make a, you know, few moments or a minute to make some introductory comments, we'd be happy to hear those.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to interview. I'll be really brief. I'll introduce myself as a resident, a professional, and a volunteer. Resident, I've lived in Palo Alto since 1974. We've been in the same house since 1974. We have 2 daughters who've gone through the Palo Alto school system. As a professional, I began my career at the Federal Reserve Bank, worked for the California Center of the Continuing Study, California Economy. Spent the bulk of my career in new product planning in pharmaceuticals and biotech. Went into Peace Corps in 1999, and then have done a lot of work in Africa and former Soviet Union since then. Volunteer, I've been on daycare boards, school site councils, theater boosters, and then most recently the Library Advisory Commission when we went through the LISMAR process and the funding process. I tried to strip adjectives to stay in my 30 seconds, but I hope that you'll ask questions and I'll answer appropriately to your needs.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Schmidt.
Thanks for applying. And Human Relations Commission is an important one, deal with a wide range of issues. What priorities would you have going in there? These are key issues.
My priority, although I don't have an agenda, but my priority is diversity in our community. That would be age, gender, economic, particularly economic diversity. I've always felt that that's really important in a community, and I think that was reinforced today in the New York Times by a study, it was probably on NPR also, about how much a child is advantaged by having exposure to a better school system and a better community. And I think the part that article omitted, or I don't want to say that because it maybe wasn't part of the study, but I think the other part of that is how much advantaged children benefit from exposure to disadvantaged children, or how much a community thrives by diversity. And I'd like to be part of ensuring that we remain a diverse, heterogeneous community.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Niss?
So, it's intriguing. I'm thinking how to word this. Maybe in the second part of your life, you decided to go into Peace Corps. So, tell us about what motivated that, and where did you end up, and was it something you really enjoyed?
It was life-changing. I enjoyed it tremendously. I guess one day I was driving up 101 to Genentech, caught in traffic, which I thought was terrible. I had no idea what traffic would be like today, but at the time it seemed horrendous. And I said, you're either doing this because you need to, and at that point we had an education fund, a pension fund, and a house managed. I thought, well, either you're doing this because you need to or you want to, or you can do something you've always wanted to do. And I wanted to explore lifelong learning. I wanted to give something back. And I wanted to see if I could learn a modern language. Well, I had the experience of living in another country. I had the experience of giving something back. But older years just aren't good at learning Arabic, so I wasn't so successful in that regard. But I had a fascinating experience. And it changed what I was able to do in the next decade. It opened up doors to me. It opened up it gave me new exposure, new appreciation for different lifestyles.
Thank you. Pat?
Hi, Valerie.
Hi, good to see you.
You too. Are there certain directions that you would like to see the HRC take that are different from what they have taken in the past, or emphasis?
What I've read from the packets and from the agendas or minutes, I see nothing different. I think they seem, and I might have missed something, but what I've read is that they seem to be on target for addressing immediate needs, but also being able to develop an agenda for the future, like taking a longer term view. And they certainly run a tight meeting. I was extremely impressed by some of the minutes that were so in depth, and then they ended by 8:40. This is one hell of a chairwoman.
She is.
So I want to just continue.
Although I saw that you spoke about senior issues, and is that an area that you think we should have greater emphasis in, and if so, how?
At the time when I did my application, I was going through a horrific experience with my mother. And so that certainly colored my experience. And I was intrigued that that was the outcome of one of their study sessions. So yes, I do think that's an area where we could continue to focus. I believe, was it 5 years ago, we had a study in the city that said now I'm going to get the numbers wrong, 30% of our population would be over 55 in 2030. And please forgive me if I have those numbers wrong, because I haven't used them in a while. I mean, that's a population that needs some attention. It might be transportation, it might be an expansion of Avenidas' services, more library programs, certainly low-income rental. I found a lot of board and care facilities where my mother could live in Redwood City, not so much in Palo Alto. I'm going to change gears for a second, but I remember doing a dinner for homeless, and we prepared the dinner. We bought the food, we prepared the dinner. We all sat down to dinner together, and the man across from me looked at me and said, "Hi." And he was a man I had worked with. And just there, by the grace of God, he was on the other side of the table. And I think we need to remember that we're a very wealthy community, but we need to be able to care for a lot of different people. And housing, transportation for elderly citizens is important, even though we think that we are well taken care of and we're secure.
Thank you. Eric?
One which is, you talked earlier about the importance of diversity, especially economic diversity in town. How
You're
can
gonna have to turn the mic on.
Sorry. You talked before about the importance of diversity, especially economic diversity in town. How can the HRC make a bigger difference than they do now?
When I was kind
That's a
of
softball question. by the way.
Yeah, when I was role playing, I thought, I wonder what they'll ask about this. Or when, that was the question that I knew would come, and I knew I wouldn't have a good answer for. I guess my indirect answer is the way I would approach a problem in industry or in a third world country is to do the situation analysis, walk the walk, and really start to identify areas that are well served, areas where there are high needs, and start to prioritize, bring together groups in the community as they've done with the senior issue, and then bring some recommendations to staff and to council and hope that we can move forward, either on with a coalition of nonprofits, with that's, I guess, a coalition of nonprofits. And that is the way we started daycare in Palo Alto, was addressing a need, putting together a nonprofit. City helped get it started, kick-started it, and now it's independent. Or not city-funded as much.
So we have just over a minute, and Tom has a question.
That exact, I saw your comment about your mother, so yes, the only question I was gonna ask about senior services. I'll go the other way though, and actually, two quick ones, so when you say childcare, is that the Palo Alto?
Palo Alto
childcare?
Child Care Community.
Yeah, okay, so you were involved in that at the beginning?
I was, yeah.
So, do you have ideas of programs for, say, teens or youth that the HRC should get involved in?
I guess I would have to research that more because my bias is theater and poetry, and I just don't think there's enough outlets for literary arts in Palo Alto. I mean, there is the children's theater, and both of my girls were really involved in that for a long time, and they do a great job. But beyond that, there's a need for some more avant-garde or abstract theater, and I would love to see Mitchell Park Community Center be a place where teens could try some different sorts of less mainstream activities.
Thanks.
Thank you, and we're out of time, but if you'd care to make a couple of closing statements, please feel free.
The question I was hoping you would ask was why I wanted to be at the HRC. And so I will answer that as quickly as I can to say that I obviously, or certainly want to give something back, but my experience on the Library Advisory Commission was that I got more out of it than I put into it. Drilling down on a particular issue, the experience of drilling down, the learning that went with that, the involvement in city affairs, the satisfaction of taking my mother to College Terrace, of walking by Mitchell Park now and seeing something that I was involved in was immensely gratifying. So process-wise, that's really important to me. And then working on a commission that would in some way be involved with maintaining diversity in our community would be very satisfying. And so that was my application.
Well, thank you, and you may be the first candidate we've ever had interviewed since, to my knowledge anyway, they asked and answered their own question.
Okay.
So thank you, and thank you for your
Thank you.
application, and we look forward to seeing you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we will.
You never learned the Arabic, right?
So-
I can speak a little.
So it is time for us to adjourn into the council chambers.